For decades, Britain stood at the heart of global aviation. Its engineers built the engines that powered the world's skies. China, meanwhile, was expected to assemble parts, not design aircraft. But something has changed. While the West debated costs, regulations, and market risks, China quietly built factories, trained engineers, and flew prototypes. Not to impress investors, not to win awards, but to remove dependence. Today, Chinese aircraft are entering commercial service without Western engines, without Western approvals, and increasingly, without Western permission. So this is no longer a story about technology. It's a story about control, sovereignty, and who will dominate the skies in the next decade. And Britain may be closer to that question than it realizes. For a long time, Chinese aviation was treated as a footnote in the global aerospace industry. China assembled parts, followed Western designs, and relied heavily on foreign suppliers. Boeing and Airbus dominated its skies, while Western engines powered almost every commercial aircraft flying in and out of Chinese airports. That era is ending. At the center of this shift is COMAC, China's state-backed aircraft manufacturer. Unlike its Western rivals, COMAC was never built to maximize short-term profits or impress shareholders. Its mission is far more strategic: give China control over its own skies. The flagship example is the C919. On paper, it doesn't outperform the Airbus A320 or the Boeing 737. It doesn't need to. The aircraft was designed with one goal in mind: to be good enough to replace Western planes inside China. And in aviation, replacing imports at scale is already a victory. China operates one of the largest and fastest-growing aviation markets on Earth. Hundreds of new aircraft are needed every year just to keep up with domestic travel demand. By introducing a locally produced alternative, China doesn't need global dominance to succeed. It only needs domestic adoption, and that alone can sustain an entire aerospace ecosystem. What makes this different from past attempts is patience. China has been working toward aviation independence for decades. Engineers were trained, supply chains mapped, and production bottlenecks identified long before the first C919 carried passengers. Western analysts often underestimate this approach because it doesn't move fast, until suddenly it does. Equally important is political backing. Airlines inside China are encouraged, and in some cases expected, to prioritize domestic aircraft. Financing, certification, and airport access are aligned behind the same objective. This is not a free market experiment. It's industrial strategy. Critics often focus on what China still lacks: engines, advanced materials, or decades of experience. But that misses the larger picture. Every aircraft delivered, even if imperfect, trains thousands of workers, refines manufacturing processes, and reduces reliance on foreign suppliers. Aviation is not built in leaps. It's built in layers. And China is adding those layers one flight at a time. The real question isn't whether Chinese aviation can compete with the West tomorrow. It's whether the West fully understands what it means when a country decides it no longer wants permission to fly. When people think of British aviation, they often imagine a nation-state supply chains stable, specialization was a strength. Britain didn't need to build everything. It only needed to build the most difficult parts. That assumption is now being tested. As aviation becomes more politicized, aircraft are no longer just transportation products. They are strategic assets. Countries that control full aircraft programs can prioritize domestic orders, steer certification standards, and protect their industries during downturns. Countries that rely on exports and partnerships have far less room to maneuver. Britain sits in that second category. Unlike China, Britain cannot force domestic airlines to buy British aircraft because there are none. It cannot absorb losses indefinitely to build future independence. Its aerospace companies must remain profitable, competitive, and globally accepted at all times. This creates a structural vulnerability. If global demand shifts, if geopolitical tensions disrupt partnerships, or if large markets begin favoring domestic alternatives, Britain has limited defenses. Its aviation industry thrives only as long as it remains indispensable to others. China understands this dynamic very well. By building entire aircraft programs, even imperfect ones, China is not just challenging Western manufacturers, it is quietly reducing the leverage of suppliers who once held irreplaceable positions in the market. Britain's aviation sector is still strong, but strength without control is not dominance, it is dependence. And in a world where aviation is becoming a measure of national sovereignty, that distinction matters more than ever. If aircraft are symbols of national power, engines that gap as unacceptable. A slightly less efficient engine that can be produced, serviced, and improved domestically is often preferable to a superior foreign engine that can be restricted, delayed, or withdrawn. This is where Britain's advantage becomes fragile. Engine leadership only matters if customers continue to buy. And as aircraft is built around doing a few things exceptionally well. High-performance engines, precision components, advanced composites, and world-class engineering services. This approach minimizes waste, maximizes efficiency, and thrives in open global markets. For decades, it delivered strong returns and global influence. China chose the opposite path. Rather than focusing only on its strongest segments, China built the entire aviation stack at once. Airframes, avionics, materials, software, testing facilities, and eventually engines. This approach is slower, more expensive, and far less efficient in the short term, but it offers something specialization never can: independence. Scale changes the rules of aviation economics. China can afford parallel programs, redundancy, and failure. It can run factories below capacity for years, sustain unprofitable aircraft models, and invest in technologies with no immediate payoff. These decisions would be unacceptable in a profit-driven system. In a state-backed system, they are strategic assets. Britain does not have this option. Its aviation sector must remain commercially viable at all times. Investment decisions are constrained by returns, shareholder expectations, and market demand. This forces efficiency, but it also limits long-term experimentation. Britain cannot afford to build an entire aircraft ecosystem simply to reduce dependence. China can. Scale also creates learning momentum. Every aircraft produced trains workers, strengthens suppliers, and improves manufacturing processes. Even flawed designs generate data, experience, and confidence. Over time, quantity turns into quality. This is why comparisons based purely on current performance miss the point. China does not need its aircraft to outperform Western models today. It needs them to exist in large enough numbers to sustain an ecosystem. Once that ecosystem matures, incremental improvements compound rapidly. Britain's strength remains real. Its expertise is still deeply embedded in global aviation. But specialization only works as long as the global system remains stable and open. When large markets begin prioritizing domestic solutions, specialized exporters face shrinking influence. China understands this trade-off clearly. It is willing to sacrifice short-term efficiency for long-term control. Britain, bound by market realities, must prioritize efficiency even when control slips away. This is not a story of one strategy being superior to the other. It is a story of two worlds colliding, one built on optimization, the other on endurance. And in aviation, endurance often determines who is still flying decades later. Aviation has never been just about flying. But today, it has become something more, a measure of national control. China's aircraft programs are not designed to dominate global markets overnight. They are designed to ensure that no foreign government, supplier, or sanction can ground China's economy. Every domestically built aircraft reduces exposure. Every locally produced component strengthens sovereignty. Britain's aviation industry remains highly advanced, respected, and technologically elite. But it exists inside a system it no longer controls. When aviation shifts from a commercial industry to a geopolitical instrument, that distinction becomes critical. This is the quiet transformation now unfolding. The future of aviation will not be decided solely by performance charts or fuel efficiency. It will be shaped by politics, scale, and resilience. Countries that can absorb inefficiency in exchange for independence will gain leverage. Those that depend on global openness will face growing uncertainty. China is preparing for a world where access is conditional. Britain is still optimized for a world where access is assumed. Neither approach is wrong, but they lead to very different outcomes. The skies of the next decade will reflect that choice, and the most important aviation battles ahead won't be fought in the air. They'll be fought in factories, supply chains, and the decisions governments make long before a plane ever leaves the runway.